She screamed at the lock, but he held the key. Walter didn't flinch. He'd measured that garage before she learned to spell property. Now, her chain rattled where his name had been welded since 2001. Walter didn't flinch. He'd seen louder people try smaller things. She rattled the chain like it made her right. But his fingers stayed wrapped around the key. Warm, worn, exact. Walter Briggs had retired from noise. Not from reason, not from land. 40 years as a mechanical engineer did something to a man. You start measuring people the same way you measure joints. Stress tolerance, failure points, how long before they twist out of spec. She had already exceeded hers. He'd spent more time in that garage than he did in his own bedroom. The concrete floor still bore a scratch from where he dropped her oxygen tank. Not this woman, the real one. The one who chose that spot, under the rafters, to hang the wind chime she never got to hear. That garage was hers first, and because of that, he'd never let anyone lock it. Walter didn't raise his voice, didn't correct the HOA notices, or the woman they sent with noise instead of evidence. He just watched her yanking metal links like she could rewrite deeds with effort. Watched her shoe crease the word approved. Watched the neighbor across the street pull his curtain with a half-whispered, "That's Briggs's land." Walter didn't turn, didn't blink. He just shifted the key in his palm until it faced forward and waited. Because some locks only answer to the first hand that made them. He didn't check the chain, didn't scan the crowd, didn't glance at the cruiser humming in the street. His eyes were still on the garage. It hadn't changed much. A new coat of paint last fall, same slate gray she picked in 2007. She said it reminded her of New England storms. He said it hid dust better. They didn't repaint after the diagnosis. The chimes she never heard still hung under the porch lamp, rust-lined, untouched. The wind caught them sometimes, just barely. Soft clinks, like a glass teacup tapping from another room. Walter used to pause mid-wrench when he heard it, not for long, just long enough to forget what bolt he'd been tightening. 7 years. Same oil stain near the front tire. Same foldable stool by the passenger side door. Same key in his hand, still warm from hers. People called it a garage. She called it the quiet room. And now, it had chains on it. His jaw tightened, but only slightly. His thumb pressed against the key's ridge, a habit he never kicked. The woman outside had no idea. She saw a man who never argued, not the one who skipped work on Thursdays just to reset her radio presets. Not the one who spent 3 winters insulating the garage so her oxygen tank wouldn't freeze. Walter didn't need to speak. He just needed to stay long enough for her to realize whose door she'd tried to lock. He let the wind roll past him, let the neighbor's curtain fall shut again. But something had shifted in the grip of his hand, a quiet surge beneath the silence. Not rage, not pride, just something that no longer wanted to stay behind the door. She wasn't alone anymore. A second woman had stepped out from the black SUV parked at the curb, clipboard, sunglasses, matching attitude. They didn't knock, didn't speak to Walter. They started measuring the garage with a laser level, without permission. One marked a spot on the cement. The other planted a short orange flag. Walter blinked. He'd seen those flags before. When his neighbor lost half his hedge to an easement correction. When the county reclassified his back fence without warning, and when they poured a sidewalk across Bill's driveway. The woman in white kept pulling the chain. The new one took photos of the sign. A third man approached, gray vest, thick folder, no name tag. He dropped a folded paper at Walter's feet. Notice of temporary access adjustment effective pending HOA boundary review. Citation, code CVC 22088-A3. His hands stayed at his sides, but his fingers twitched once. Temporary. Adjustment. Walter had filed every record since 2001. He knew every code on that wall. There was no A3. One of the women turned and waved at the police cruiser. Too casual, too confident. The officer didn't walk forward, just nodded back, as if the roles had already been cast. Walter looked at the flag again. It had been stabbed through the crack where her wheelchair ramp used to lie. Still faint in the concrete, still sacred. He stepped forward, not fast, not loud, just enough. The chain caught her mid-yank. She turned. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, just looked down at the paper near her boot, and then slowly looked up. Her hand stayed on the lock, but her mouth didn't move, because for the first time, she realized he wasn't standing still. This course, Walter stepped forward. I have never changed. His voice didn't rise, but it stopped the clipboard cold. He unlatched the chain. No sudden force, just a steady twist of the key. The lock clicked. She flinched, like she'd heard a sentence. He stooped, picked up the trampled paper, shook off the dust, and placed it flat on the hood of her SUV. Property record, lot 112, issued June 2001, filed by Briggs, W plus Crane, L, authorization code CVC 22088. The crowd stirred. Some leaned forward, a whisper. Crane? That was his wife's name. The officer paused at the cruiser, no hand on the gun, but no longer moving. Walter didn't speak to him, just raised the copper key again. This time, he pointed to the smaller sign. The metal read, Registered Deed, 22 years, no transfer filed. He opened his palm. Inside, a faded photo. Two people, shoulder to shoulder. A woman's hand on his arm, her bracelet, gleaming like the one in the photo on the paper. The clipboard woman's lips parted. She looked at the document again. Lower. To the second signature. Filed under authority. Director, Civic Review Board, M. Linton. She blinked, and in that blink, something cracked. A murmur behind her. Wait, that's Marla Linton, the one from zoning. Walter didn't respond, didn't need to. He folded the paper once, held it out, no threat, only calm. I don't scream, he said. I keep receipts. The chain dropped. The officer began to step forward, and Walter stepped toward the garage, not fast, not loud, but with the kind of walk you don't interrupt. The officer stepped forward, not fast, not slow, just enough to part the heat between them. Karen's voice broke the air first. He forged that sign. Ask anyone. No one answered. Walter didn't flinch. He only adjusted the photo, so the name Crane faced forward. His fingers steady, his eyes on the sea behind her. The officer looked down. The chain, the crushed approval slip. The words, property record since 2001. He tilted his head. A neighbor spoke up. Low voice. Clear. That sign's been there since before she moved in. Another followed. Used to be his wife's. She painted that wall. Karen snapped back. They're lying. This is HOA land. Controlled space. But even her own clipboard wobbled. The officer stepped closer. Not to her. To the post. He touched the old bolt holes. Weather-worn. Rusted through. Bent down. Read the small metal plate. Registered deed. Briggs. Validated 2001. His jaw shifted once. No radio, no words, just a glance. Toward Walter, then toward her. You don't need to say anything, he muttered. The sign's been hung long enough. Karen blinked. The clipboard dropped. No one moved to pick it up. Walter tucked the photo back into his pocket, smoothed his shirt, stepped past her, like she wasn't even part of the structure. The police didn't stop him. Neither did the crowd. He unlocked the garage, pushed it open. Inside, dust, old paint. A red-handled wrench still hanging on the pegboard, untouched, undisturbed. Behind him, her voice trembled. You can't just... But the sentence never finished, because in that silence, the garage door stopped halfway, and Walter stood still in its shadow. No one said a word, no need. The justice had already clicked shut. The wind shifted, just enough to rattle the metal sign. Private property, CVC 22088. No one spoke, not Karen, not the officer. Walter stood in the garage doorway, half inch, half shadow. His eyes paused on a shelf near the workbench. An old tin box, rust along the hinges, painted once by someone with smaller hands. He reached for it, opened it, folded the approved paper once, then again, until it fit like it always had. pressed it into the box, closed the lid. No slam, just the click of a man who measures things once, cuts twice. Behind him, the officer turned, not to arrest, just to walk. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't move. Some shifted their weight, some looked away. Karen stayed frozen, not chained by law, but by what had just walked past her. Walter didn't gloat. He didn't look back. He just stepped inside and placed the key back into the original latch, like it had never left. The chain lay curled beside the wall. She didn't touch it. Light streamed through a crack in the tin roof, landing exactly where the oil can once stood. He stared for a moment. 1 breath. 2. No more. Somewhere far off, a screen door shut. A dog barked once. Walter placed his hand on the doorframe. Rough, real, still holding the dent his wife once called the scar. He whispered something, too quiet for anyone to hear. Maybe not words, maybe just goodbye. Then he turned off the light. From outside, the garage swallowed him whole. No doors slammed, no engines started, no one followed, but the sign still hung, and from that day forward, no one questioned what it meant. Some houses never grow loud, but they remember. The creak of a hinge, the rust on a nail. The way morning light lands on the same corner, year after year. Not every fight needs to be won with a voice. Some are measured by who still holds the key. He didn't raise his hand, didn't raise his voice, only stood where memory still lived and waited for silence to catch up. People forget, documents fade, crowds move on. But time remembers who stood still with truth in their pocket. The wind still passes that old sign. It doesn't ask who hung it, it just knows. No one touches it now. There are doors no one breaks again, because someone once closed them, quietly, and sometimes that's all it takes. A man, a key, and the refusal to unlearn what matters.